Welcome back to the Global Indian Podcast, home to the greatest conversations and the official platform for liberal open minds. Now, every week, we plunge ourselves into the human experience behind our perceptions of identity, take a second look at the countries we now call home, and tackle the big conversations. Well, for most people across the United Kingdom, one thing has been for sure is the incidence is shaping up in this small little city called Leicester. Now, to re-understand the bigger dynamics in place, I thought the best thing for me to do is introduce two of my friends together on the platform to take a discussion on, and two people who are very close to the issue. Now, for those of you listening from far afield, Leicester saw some of the biggest riots taking place. Many people said that it was a Hindu-Muslim riot that was happening, and then it transferred itself over to places like Birmingham. But I think for a lot of people in the know, there's probably a lot more to the mix there than behind the glossy headlines. So to introduce my two dear friends, my partners in this discussion, I'm joined by Hardeep Singh. Hardeep Singh is a very renowned journalist in the UK. He's written for the likes of Times, Guardian. His work actually around this is what broke the story for people to look at the rise of fake news behind the Leicester riots. Not only has he written for those pieces, he's also writes with the Global Indian. I'm going to plug you into our website there, Hardeep. So he writes with the Global Indian, and he's published a lot of key stories about the way that we look at identity, especially around the religious perspectives as well. My other guest is Sheikh. Zed is a dear friend of mine as well. He not only is a radio host in Leicester, he's also a cultural custodian in Leicester. And he's been talking a lot about some of the key issues that most people are neglecting there. So as both of you have been introduced, why don't we kick it off? Zed, obviously you're based in Leicester. You know a lot more about this situation because you were there at that moment in time. Give us a quick breakdown of what took place in Leicester over the last week or so.
What you've read in the media across the globe and from the big media newspapers in London is not quite factual because, first of all, it wasn't a riot, it was an illegal march, but there were incidents leading up to that march going on for a year where you had some extreme elements taking place in the city of Leicester where they were attacking single Muslim people and causing incitement basically in a couple of areas in Leicester. And it was going on steadily over the last year. And then it emanated to this provocative incitement march that came over to Leicester. It was an illegal march. It wasn't arranged with the police. It wasn't arranged with the local council. And when coach loads are coming there and they wear masks, then that in itself tells you a story. So what you saw happening is the old 1, 2, 3, 4 is to create havoc with these masqueraders and then get the opposition or the alternative to come out there to chant against them and then bring the police out. And then number 4 is to start the demonizing process. And that's exactly what the reality is, which we all have to face up to.
So when we see the videos of the short clippets that are made its way across national news here, we see demonstrations outside of a mandir, for example, I think in Birmingham. We see a lot of these key issues. Now, how do you describe that then? Because you're saying it started off with issues taking place over a year, but this was a peaceful march that was almost in retaliation, but then it turned into this vise of what the media is saying is religious hatred.
So religious hatred has been here since the beginning of time. It's no different today that it was yesterday, but right now we have an escalation because if you will recall 20 years ago when we started with the Al Qaeda and we started with the ISIS, these are extreme groups that have been operating for many, many years. Now we have other groups. And the worst thing is that we have brown on brown racism emanating from this. If we don't nip it in the bud, this thing will get absolutely worse.
Hardeep, what are your thoughts?
There's a lot to unpack there. And Zed's sort of local, so he's got more kind of on the ground insight, clearly, more so than me. I think the way that this has been depicted initially was interesting, because when you look at a lot of the reporting in the press, they hinged all of this dispute or this public disorder on a cricket match initially. So that was obviously quite misleading, but that was the kind of narrative that was sort of played out. So we've all seen the video. We've seen some Indian cricket fans walking around the streets of East Leicester, shouting, I think it was Pakistan Murdabad, which not very nice thing to say, and inflammatory. And then we saw a tussle with an individual who I think, from my understanding, was assumed to be of Pakistani heritage, and there was a bit of flag snatching, and violence ensued, and a police officer was injured that night. That was on the 28th of August. And when we look at how this has been framed initially in the press, there was a narrative coming out that this was all down to a cricket match. This was sort of, Indian nationalists who were, anti-Pakistan, which, to some degree was true. But then the whole thing took a totally different turn and, evolved into something much greater and much worse. And I think as time has gone on, we've realized that a lot of what's happened is been driven by fake news. So that's kind of one of the things that I looked at when I initially wrote about this. There were rumours, for example, that a mosque had been attacked. There were other rumours that were instigated and perpetuated on social media that a young Muslim girl, there was an attempt to kidnap her by some Hindu men. And there's been rumours on the other side. There was, I believe, a fire that had occurred, and that was blamed on Islamists, which again was fake news. It was wrong. So I think all of these things, I think social media has had a real, really driven animosities, and this generation of fake news has really added fuel to the fire.
Zed's saying that the issues have been a year-long standing. That's what you mentioned, Zed, that there's been direct problems there. What has caused these problems? Because if we look at the factual part, Leicester's quite an interesting place in the UK. 50 years ago, you obviously had this huge community that came from Uganda that was based in Leicester. And that was the time that you actually had racism. You had the rise of the EDL early part as a national front that was taking place. From there, you've had this bustling communities of people that have been living side by side. So vast majority came from places like East Africa. Then you had the new waves of immigrants from Pakistan and from India. What happened a year ago? What was causing these divides to take shape then, in your opinion?
What happens is that in every inner city, you have these ghettos that are created, and the new immigrants come and they did what we did 50 years ago. We were living, 15 to a little terraced house, and they go through that. And those days were different. And you all telling me, the world telling me that it has taken 50 years to emanate this problem of religious hatred between two communities who have been living here for so long. We have Sikhs here, we have Muslims that are from Pakistan, Muslims from India, Muslims from Africa, you have Bangladesh Muslims, you have Sri Lankan Muslims, you have Sri Lankan Christians, you have Sri Lankan Indians. I can go on forever. So when you're talking about diversity, up to 50 diversities are living here. And has it taken 50 years for somebody to light a little fire and then everything explodes? So I would much rather today talk about going forward solutions and how we're going to nip this in the bud. How this has emanated, obviously, is important to know. And like, if you remember the last 20 years, the Prevent government set up organization were targeting Muslims in mosques and going to all the faith community, going to the mosques. And today we have a problem of extremism, radicalism, racism, fascism, and we have to deal with that. And we have to call it out. Is it fascism that starts first, or racism, or radicalism, or extremism? Which order would you like to call it out in? They're all related. All these four subjects are interconnected. And if you take young, vulnerable individuals who are poverty stricken, it's going to be very easy to mold them to an ideology which is there to divide humanity. So we've seen it all before. It's nothing new. It's a textbook issue here, right? Which we have to call it out for what it is. It's extremism, it's radicalism, it's racism, it's fascism.
Where's the extremism coming from, in your opinion, then? Which communities are exhibiting those behaviors? Because earlier on, I know that you sent a video over that was quite disturbing to watch. It was about the HSS, and it's a Hindu group that is based, and some of the inflammatory remarks that they were making. But in your opinion, then, where is this extremist views coming from? Is it coming from the Muslim community? Is it the Hindu community? Which communities is this now being born into?
Is that for me or for Hardeep?
For yourself, Saad.
This extremism, it can come in any shape, form, or manner. But right now, when investigations are carried out, this extremism is coming from the RSS, which is an extremist group where you have seen many videos where undercover reporters have gone in there and you've seen the ideology that they are pursuing. And this ideology is not for the common development of humanity. This ideology is for one sect against another one. So if you haven't got a religion against another, you've got a ideology, a sect-driven poison that is infiltrating our communities and the young minds that we have to protect. We have a moral duty here to protect our children and create a better future for our children and our grandchildren. That's our duty today.
Yeah,
We have to do that.
And it's a very utopian thought. And I do hear what you're saying, which is saying we need to look at a way forward. But as you rightly pushed as well, in order to look forward, we need to understand how do we get here as well. Now, Hardeep, what are your thoughts? Because you're hearing this, and you're hearing from Zed that actually some of the key issues were coming derived in over 50 years. You got new immigrants that come through, and he's saying that it was a unplanned, unauthorized march that took place. You're obviously a journalist that broke this story out there. When you hear Zed's point of view, what are the thoughts that are going through your mindset?
The first thing on Leicester is that it has always been hailed as a multicultural success story. So, you already cited the Ugandan refugees, the 50th anniversary of that. These were highly successful people who came here and succeeded in Leicester again. My understanding is many of those have subsequently kind of moved out the centre of Leicester, to the suburbs. But I think it's important to say, to begin with, that the majority of Hindus and Muslims in Leicester are law-abiding citizens. There is a minority of political agitators who have been kind of fueling division in Leicester. And it's interesting because both sides accuse each other of, one side accuses of being Islamist, the other side accuses the other side of being Hindutva. Now, I know there was an interview done very recently by a researcher, Charlotte Littlewood, and she interviewed one of the victims in Leicester, and he was of Indian heritage, Hindu, and she interviewed him and asked him what his affiliations were, and he said that he actually didn't even know what the RSS was. So that was interesting. I think on the other side, we can't deny that there have been some extremists who've come into Leicester promoting division and adding fuel to the fire. One of the things that I think there's a lot of opportunists who are trying to kind of build their own brand, build their own name, and kind of come in to be sort of saviours, if you like, for their community, and that's not really been very helpful. It's kind of created problems for the people in Leicester. But I think what really needs to be done is that people need to really get to the core issues here, and I think it's complex. It's not just ideological. It's not just based on religion. these are certainly elements that have played a part. But I think Zed makes a point around ghettoisation, which I think is important. You know, some communities are in poverty, you know, and that causes problems and social disintegration. And I think, you know, the other thing is that we need to acknowledge this isn't a unique situation. Leicester is an example of when things can go bad, but we had it in the late 1990s. We had it between the Sikh and Muslim communities, serious civil unrest in places like Slough, Birmingham, and the Midlands. It did get the press that Leicester has got, and I think that's partly because at the time it wasn't the social media age. People didn't have smartphones or taking, you know, videos and sort of disseminating them far and wide like they are with what's happened in Leicester. You also had last year, you had some pro-Palestinian convoy of cars that went to Jewish areas in London shouting anti-Semitic slogans. So, you know, this isn't just Leicester. And of course, you know, the Oldham riots, you know, this is sort of recent history. So I think we've got to put this into context. You know, that, you know, people are very quick to jump on, you know, look how bad things are in Leicester. Isn't it really bad? But actually, this is an issue, and where things can go wrong. This isn't just unique to Leicester, and I think we need to bear that in mind. I think the other thing is that we're still seeing people who are disseminating memes and posters to organised protests, particularly outside Munders, going to different areas. I mean, you mentioned Smethwick. It happened in Smethwick. It happened in Coventry. I think Nottingham, there was an issue. I've just seen a poster somebody sent to me about doing a protest outside of Mundere in Derby. So there's people who are trying to set little fires, you know, and trying to perpetuate this animosity. Yes, I think there is a point around RSS is a particularly nasty organisation. It's an Indian right-wing Hindu nationalist group, which is in India. There's huge persecution of minorities, and there's rhetoric which is very unpleasant towards people of other faiths, including Muslims as well as Sikhs in some situations. So, I mean, I cast my mind back to the farmers' protest, where some Hindu nationalists were going on social media and calling for another 1984, another genocide. So, you know, these are the kind of ugly things that these people say. How much of that has influenced events in Leicester? I haven't personally seen any evidence to prove that's the case. But you know, that's something that we need to keep an eye on. But I think Zed is right. I think the key thing is how do people move forwards from this? There is a fear that this could carry on in some way, and there could be parallels with what happened with the Protestants and Catholics in Northern Ireland. Let's hope not. But I think the key thing is that, you know, people on the ground, community leaders, and I say that phrase with a pinch of salt, because community leaders tend to be leaders perhaps in their own minds, but how much influence they have with, you know, the average individual member of the Hindu or Muslim community is something very different at times.
Keeping hold of that thought, Zed, I know that we've spoken about this before, and you said some of the key issues that we need to acknowledge is also the council. Now, we did invite a councillor on, and they, at the last minute, decided that they were no longer available. But Zed, do you feel that there's any type of issues also with the council that is helping perpetuate these divides?
Well, it's a countrywide problem. You live in inner cities which are all about demographic politics, which really should be changed to demographic politricks. If you have heard of that word in the Oxford Dictionary, politricks, it's going to be the new word one day added to the dictionary. So you have demographic issues where if Indians are living in one particular area, the government or the Labour or the Conservatives or the Lib Dems, they'll pitch an Indian councillor there so that he wins the vote there. That means he's going to pitch and bat for his team. He's not going to pitch for, they're not there on merit. They are selected, they're not elected. So now this councillor who did not turn up today, why did he not turn up? Because he's afraid. He's worried that if he says something, he'll get shot by his party and they have to follow the party line. Now, when you have 54 councillors who are all sitting there like sitting ducks, they've created a division amongst themselves. You have the Indian councillors and you have the Muslim councillors. How are you going to run the country like that based on
It's
division
interesting
of
that you
human
make that
beings?
division, though, because you say India as a nation and Muslim as a religion. So then, do the Muslim community see themselves as being Indian, even though they were born in India? Or is it almost like the vibe now that India is no longer seen as a nation that has the Muslim community, the Sikh community, and other minorities?
Well, today we're saying Muslim and Indian, but in reality, everything is now down to identity crisis we have the world over, right? Fascism is on the rise everywhere, not only in England, in America, in every country you can think of, fascism is on the rise. Along with fascism comes in the bucket the extremism, and along with that will come the racism and then the radicalization. These are all relations to each other.
And we've
So
seen instances
if
like that in
the
Iran, yeah.
yeah, so if we don't come forward, today I can break down, if you say somebody's a Muslim, there's about how many categories of Muslims there are, how many categories of Indians there are, right? So we are creating an issue, brown on brown issue, which is going to damage us in the long run, right? We never had these issues. When we were in Uganda, we are today pitching the value of immigration from Uganda that came to this country from East Africa. We are pitching that all over the country to show what an asset we were.
Yeah, but I
Do
think
you think
even with
that
that,
our work will be appreciated and they'll throw this example to us about Leicester, what happened here?
well, then the same
Hey,
argument
good
can be
we've done
made
in
about
50
you.
years is
The same argument can be made about Uganda, saying, well, if we have a look at the tokens of who came from Uganda, then we're looking at people like Priti Patel, and we can't say that she is a custodian of truth of immigration policies that unite people together. If we have a look at some of the key issues that took place in Uganda, back in Uganda, where you had huge divisions of wealth, again, that is not a success story. That's a story of division once more. And these are where you have the rising issues. But coming back to the point at hand, looking at Leicester, there's another idea here saying about Britishness then. Surely when you have immigrants that have come in and they've been here for a longer period of time, how many of them, in your opinion, Zed, feel that they are truly British? So therefore the national applause of different nations no longer have impact on them.
Oh, are we at that question now, Hardeep, that we see at the airport? Where are you from? Or often people will say, "Where are you from?" And
Well,
you
where are
say,
you
"I am
really
from my."
from? No, I mean
Yeah,
really, really from.
yeah.
Yeah.
We've all been through that one,
Yeah.
and now our teaching on that one is to say, "I am from my mother." Where are you from? And then the reply comes back, "I'm also from my mother." I says, "Great, we are going to get on." And this is where I'm talking about identity crisis, where if you give the wrong answer, you're likely to be disadvantaged. So where am I from today? I'm a British, ex-Ugandan, ex-South Asian, right? Uprooted from South Asia to Uganda, uprooted from there to Britain. And God knows what will happen. If the Windrush happens to me, I'll be uprooted from here as well,
And
right?
we often meet more outside of the country than we do inside the UK. So it's one of those things. But this question of Britishness for you then, Hardeep, when you have a look at this is the British police and the British general public are saying, well, all this violence in the street is emanating from India, Pakistan, which is I think there's a lot more to unpick there. But they're kind of claiming that these are immigrants creating these issues, that these are people that still have affiliation with the motherlands of choice. Now, there must be a scary rhetoric that has been built up from that side as well, because as much as it is about this inward tensions that are happening there, there's also the way that Great Britain looks towards its immigrants. What are the deeper fears that you have here? What can this cause in the outer run?
Well, it sort of depends on how people want to choose to identify themselves, doesn't it? So you've got, we're all British. We stem from, the Indian subcontinent. We have our religious affiliations, affinities to some degree. Some people would say they're more secular or, humanist. I think one of the issues that one of the criticisms that will come from people that oppose multiculturalism as a sort of policy is that actually, well, Leicester is an example of how those policies over so many years have culminated into this, and it's a total failure. But I think that's unfair. I think, the people involved in this are a minority within each of those communities. And to smear kind of everyone and say, well, look, it's all really bad and it's a total failure, I think takes away kind of success stories within the communities, and generally, most people get on. Obviously there are examples of activists that are coming from outside of Leicester, and there was one guy saying some particularly odious things about Hindus and reincarnation, and making some reference to them, how they've been, reincarnated into a pathetic, weak, cowardly people. I think those were his words. So these identities are also causing a conflict, because you've got some people who are, if you like, uber religious and uber identitarian, in the sense that they kind of put their faith before they put any other identity. So, for example, I would probably describe myself as a British Sikh, but other people may not take that view, and their faith would come first, and their loyalty is not to the nation first, but it's to their faith. And I think when you see that, when you see those sort of ideologues kind of popping along, you can see how tensions are created, and how they're perpetuated with what is essentially othering. It's an othering of people. It's a dehumanization, saying actually we're better than them. And I think that's the real danger in this, is that when you get people who are trying to create disharmony, and are coming into Leicester from outside, and there have been, I think that's kind of where this problem can go on for longer. I think that really needs to be nipped in the bud. But I think as far as how we reflect on this as an Indian diaspora, I think we need to make sure that the success stories from Uganda, in Leicester, the kind of great businesses, the politicians, the academics, everyone within the Indian diaspora communities are still celebrated, and this is not seen as something that's reflective of everyone from the Indian subcontinent. This is it's a big deal. It's a problem, but it's in many ways this is a minority that's actually involved in this and perpetuating this. So I think, if anything, we need to be kind of very clear on that. We need to sort of celebrate some of the successes of multiculturalism, when actually acknowledging it, actually there are some real downsides to it, and this is an example of one of them.
And I suppose that's the thing, multiculturalism for the sake of multiculturalism, and coming from what you said, almost as a social lubricant for vote harvesting, to say, hey, great, look how great and how unique we are as people. And I am the leader, the self-elected leader, member of whichever political party it is that's making this happen. That's where the dangers start to come in, because we're having leaders, as you rightly said, Hardeep, that are coming that probably don't have the community's best interests at heart, but it is about self-gain. Zed, what's your biggest fear when it comes to a place like Leicester? Because obviously Leicester means something to you. You mean something to Leicester, but does it mean anything to each other at this moment in time? Because obviously you're saying the divides have been there, and it's not just a tinderbox that overnight it just ignites, that this is something that's been ongoing. What are your fears?
I fear for the next generation, our children, our grandchildren, because if we don't have those mindsets set correctly, then I fear for tomorrow. Definitely. So yesterday was good because we Asians came here, we all were penniless and we worked hard, and after 50 years we see this problem there. And I agree with Hardeep that this is a fringe element, a minority that is causing this problem. And then the fake media is kicking in, the narrative is changing around. When media the world over picks it up, you see victimhood being played out, right? Fabricated stories, and the perpetrators play victim. And it's how well you market that you're going to win brownie points from. This is what is a big danger to all of us, right? The media have a role to play, and all I'm asking is that the whole establishment, the councillors, the MPs, everybody, all of us should come together and we should condemn any form of extremism wherever it comes from. It does not matter which country it comes from. We should condemn extremism. We should condemn radicalism. We should condemn racism. We should condemn fascism. Otherwise, all our journey of the DCI, which I don't know if Hardeep is aware of DCI. Hardeep, are you aware of that?
No, you'll have to educate me. So.
The DCI is the Detective Chief Inspector if you're a policeman, but here in Leicester, it means diversity, cohesion, and integration. And we have to go straight down that road to see how we're going to step up our integration between all communities.
So I suppose
we don't want
the
an us and them situation.
The deeper question is maybe the us and them is about those ghetto-ish communities that have been forced together, in the sense of when you've got people that aren't validated in any other means, where you don't have money coming in, where you don't have that disposable income, the next sense of validation for most people will turn to, okay, well, what are the intangibles that I can hold on to that demonstrate that I too am worthy? And most people will find that sometimes in the fringe elements within religion, because it's something that can't be debated. It's something that people don't speak about. And now when all of a sudden you hold on to that, you will fight fearlessly for that. And it's not because you're religious, it's because you're not being awarded any other opportunity, in my mind, in the economic sense, to actually have progress being done. Everybody wants to be validated. So then, as much as we're talking about diversity, as much as we're talking about unity, there's a whole issue of income inequality. And there's a great saying that goes, if the wealthy do not share their riches, the poor will share their poverty. So is that something that Leicester needs to look at then, that income inequality taking place? And if so, then what are some of the roads maps that are coming forward from the business community, people like yourself said, that's actually helping mend those issues?
Well, you know, throughout the country, as we're speaking right now, we have major crises with food prices going up, the energy crisis going up, and you will all be shocked to know that girls are not turning up to school. Why? Because they can't even afford the sanitary towel that they need. It's an essential for them, right? Essentials they don't have. They don't have money to buy essentials. So we need to address those issues and work together as a country to put those things in order, right? These are the facts. I feel very, very sad about that, because in Uganda, that is what we're doing. We're creating sustainable sanitation for the girls there. They don't come to school because of that reason. And how do you think I feel when I come to England and I find that the same thing is happening here? I was shocked. Are you not shocked to hear that?
I'm not surprised, unfortunately, and I say that in a way of being unfortunate. You can see that there is poverty, but again, coming back to the whole Leicester issue, I think you said something right at the beginning. That it was an unorganized march, and that's kind of put something in my head here. So what do you think is a misconception people have about the issue? And the only reason why I'm coming back to this is because I think it's only fair that we have clarity to understand how did we get here? Because you're saying some of the key issues is with not the othering, not the other community, but certain fringe elements of communities that are almost aggravating this further.
So when the unorganized march, what I meant by that is that when you want to conduct a march, you have to seek permission from the police and you have to seek permission from the council, right? Then you are into an organized march where they are prepared for you and they supervise it, they manage it. None of that happened. When 200 to 300 persons come with masks on, why masks? Why you want to wear a mask, right? Because you want to hide your identity.
It's
you don't want to
COVID.
be.
No, I get you. But
No.
which people were these individuals that you're saying, the 200 to 300 individuals?
The individuals who were wearing the masks was the perpetrators, right? Who came from London and they came into Leicester. Now, when they're wearing masks, then they want to hide their identity, and then they are tooled up carrying weapons. And nobody even talked about the imam who was standing in front of the temple, stopping people to attack the temple. You didn't hear about that in the media. You didn't hear about the gentleman who pulled the guy down who was trying to pull at the flag. You didn't talk about that, or you didn't hear about that. There are many incidents. The Hindu lad who was in a car and his car was being attacked, where one Muslim boy went there to rescue him, and he was on the media yesterday. They were doing a Sky News interview with each other, right? So these are the elements I'm telling you, where the media, it takes one side of the story, fabricates it, and it creates havoc across the world. So we have to get on with the business. We have to try to get everybody in the community to come out and condemn. And then you will move forward in the right direction. Because when you allow hyenas to come and attack you and you're on your own, you have no chance.
But
Even a
then
lion cannot
if you're,
withstand
and
30
I want to bring you
hyenas.
in here, Hardeep, as well. But before I do, if you're saying all it takes is the whole community to come out to condemn this, then surely that's a very easy fix. But you're saying that these problems have been there for over 50 odd years. So it must be much more than just a public display of politics to say, guys, you've been naughty. This is terrible. We're better than this. Let's all come together, hold hands and say, joint we are. Like, Hardeep, am I being pessimistic here?
I think you've got to have some hope, because otherwise it's quite a grim prospect just thinking about where this could all go. I think some of the I think Zed's got a point around media's role in this, but I think that the other thing that we've sort of discussed before is that a lot of this was instigated because of social media, because of messages on WhatsApp. I mean, not many people know that the man that was attacked on the 28th of August after the cricket match was actually of Sikh heritage. But then a rumor was perpetuated that he was of Muslim heritage. And that kind of instigated things and created problems almost immediately. So part of the responsibility actually lies with all of us, that only share information that you know to be true. And I think Leicester police have certainly sort of tweeted that out. I think Coventry police sort of did something the same, because wild rumours are causing problems, and we're still seeing this happen now. We're still seeing things coming out and people trying to perpetuate things on Instagram, and we've got to be really mindful that there's people who are deliberately trying to create more problems and fuel this. I think it was a Munda in Ealing Road, Wembley. That was also there was a report that there was going to be a protest there. You had a statement from Barry Gardner, the MP, and the Met Police were obviously in attendance. So we've got to make sure that, if anything, these things really need to stop, because that's not really helping the tensions, and it's not allowing people to kind of move on from what's happened in Leicester.
What are your thoughts on when you have countries like India and Pakistan getting involved in this? Because I've personally found that quite strange. I thought, well, you have more Muslims in India than you do in Pakistan. But then for the Indian government to say, hey, stop attacking Hindus, and the Pakistani government saying, stop attacking Muslims, does that ultimately make states almost pope-like figures for religions then? Because surely that's going to create a further divide.
Certainly unprecedented. I mean, I can't think of any other occasion where both countries have issued, the diplomatic missions have issued these kind of statements to tell Britain to for the police to do their job properly and make sure that each respective community is protected. It's an interesting question. I think there's a really big Gujarati Muslim community in Leicester, and I think over the years, I think generally they've actually really got on with the Hindu Gujarati community from India. They're both Indian. They have a lot in common. Both of these people have families and properties back home. Generally very well integrated. So I think some of these problems have been attributed to people who have been more recent migrants in the last 6 years from Damandiwa. That's certainly something that's come up a few times. And I think some of the protagonists, I think it was one of the publications was talking about almost half, I believe, of those that were arrested during the clashes were people that came from outside of Leicester. Places like Birmingham, Luton, I think one example was Hounslow as well. And these aren't necessarily people from the Indian community. So what you've got to remember is actually it's not as straightforward as, you know, this is India, Pakistan. It's actually much more complicated. And I think when we talk about this, we've got to be mindful of the complexity and acknowledge that actually the vast majority of the Muslim Gujarati community and the Hindu Gujarati community who emanate from India generally get on. I think part of this is, as we've discussed, is external agitators and political agitators from outside. I mean, even Amjad Chowdhury has made comments on Leicester now. You know, he said that there should be Muslim patrols. So you can see the kind of characters that are kind of, you know, using this to, in many ways, promote themselves.
Final thoughts with you, Zed. Where do we go from here then?
I think I will go down the same route what I mentioned earlier on, that everyone has to come out together, not individually. Today, I'm coming out individually to say that everybody should come out together, right? Together, everyone achieves more success. And if we don't do that, then we're not going to fix this problem. Now, after that, once we've done that, we should then start displaying, showcasing the 10 beautiful projects going on in the city right as we speak, which are collectively done by Hindus and Muslims together, right? So we should take the religion out of this and we should focus on our humanity.
So it's
That's
really
where
a
we
question
need
of, is almost really looking at the rise of South Asian identity outside of the parameters of these two government organizations, India and Pakistan, and saying, actually, well, we're now here in the UK, we're now British, and what does this new identity mean to us? What do we mean to it? And then how do we gel together? It is a rather perplexing question because I think there's a lot more to unpick from here, but we'll call it a wrap from here. I think it's been a fantastic discussion so far, and a massive thank you to you both for joining in. Zed, I feel like you want to say something. You got that look on your face. What is it that you want to
Yeah,
say?
just one final word. I will send a message to all the South Asians that it is not in your interest to have the white far right extremists, radicals, or the fascists, the racists to go and partner with another Asian organization or community. It's not at all going to be productive if that happens. And I can see that happening right now because your enemy is my enemy kind of thing happening right now. This is been in the media also, and we mustn't allow that. You know, that's my final message on this: is that keep away from extremism, radicalism, nationalism, patriotism, all these things that are there to divide communities.
Religionism, is that one of those?
Is that for me or
Yeah,
Hardeep?
for you, Zed, because you're saying all these isms, and would religion be part of that then? Or is
Well,
that almost pushed aside?
why bring religion into it? Religion is personal to each individual self. Let's give love and respect to every religion. This is what humanity teaches you, right? Humanity, no, where it says there in humanity that you have to go and curse and kill and all that, right? This is man-made. So we need to bring back our humanity and we have to work together as a team, regardless of caste, color, creed, culture, and all of that, you know. We need to work together as a team. We are here today. What are we doing? We're working together, right? We are not here
It's re-challenging
worrying
the
about
it's
our
re-challenging
caste.
the ideas of identity, as Hardeep mentioned. On that, we'll call it a crack. I think it's been a fantastic discussion, and thank you to you both for coming in. If there are any comments that people like to ask further discussion pieces on, come to the website. It's a really easy website to remember. It's globalindianseries.com. There you can see this conversation, an entire repertoire of discussions so far. Until next week, I hope all remains well. And if you have any info or anything that you want to discuss concerning Leicester, get in touch.